Jump in a cab and make to leave. Go where the road is taking me. Top Harry Hoover, summer dream. Be with the earth and sky will meet. And it's good if there's heat. It's all that I need. A miscellaneous affair of the congested, crazy hair. Top Harry Hoover while you're there. Because of the way you wear your face, hanging a smile that seems to say, Top Harry Hoover, won't you stay? At least till the sun will shine again. Every day the words escape me, awkward in myself. All in all is song that I wish to tell. Every day the thoughts around me go to where you're not. All in all is song sitting in my loft. Everyone is happy. Everyone is glad. Busy in my own headspace. That is where I am.
That was All Very Hoopla by the Telepathic Butterflies. I'm Kaila,
And I'm Gaia.
and welcome to the public debate here at 97.9 CHSR FM. We're the very first debate show here, so that's exciting. We're new. Nice to meet you.
So, welcome to the show. We're going to be taking over Brico Lounge today to give our debut episode for TPD, or the public debate, hosted by the UNB Debate Club.
Which, if you're interested in, we meet every Friday at 6:30 in Tilly 5. I don't know why that sounded like a
Yeah.
question. I do know the answer.
Yeah, Tilly Hall, room 5, just next to the elevators. We're open to UNB students, St. Thomas University students, and high school students from across Fredericton who wish to join in and see what it's like before they come over to university.
Yeah, and if you don't want to go to Debate Club, you can just tune in here and hear us talk about some interesting topics every week. Tentatively, we're thinking Thursday, 9 to 10?
Yep.
Yeah, tentatively. Might be subject to change. We'll see. But yeah, tune in and hear us chatting about some interesting topics. Speaking of, the topic today, right now, is schooling. Public schooling versus the freedom to choose what type of schooling you're getting, which is public school and private school and homeschooling all kind of wrapped up into one.
Yeah. So as a bit of format for what exactly our show is about.
Yeah, I probably should have done that first. I keep forgetting.
So
that
welcome
this
to
is-
what we've titled episode 0. We've already recorded a few other episodes. So this is our official debut episode that we've been preparing for. The basic format of our show is we'll come in every week and think of a topic that we can debate. We'll give a bit of background information for why we felt this debate was important, and we'll state about where our opinions come from and how we feel on the topic. Then we'll enter a bit of a conversational debate, taking our personal sides, before moving into some further discussion before we end off the episode with some music.
Yeah, I really should have probably opened with that. Doing well. This is great. Episode 0. Yeah, so that's our topic. I'm going to reiterate it after the explanation. It's public schools versus the freedom to choose what kind of schooling you want, which includes predominantly what we're going for here is it includes public schools and private schools and homeschooling. And we're each going to pick a side. Gaia?
I'm going to be taking the side that of only public schools except in extreme circumstances.
I didn't really have an opinion on this one to begin with, so I'm going to be taking the freedom to choose side, and we're going to see how it goes.
So, do you have any background opinions before we begin on this topic?
I didn't really have that many opinions. I was just kind of, I mean, I can see both sides to all the cases. Like, private schools, they definitely have a lot of downsides, but they also have some really good points. Homeschooling, there's some issues, certainly. You can't deny that one.
We'll get into that. That's my part.
Yeah, but it also, like, it can definitely improve lives and things like that. It's helpful. Public school also has downsides, so, like, I was always very much, like, a very pro-con kind of person. Like, yeah, they all have downsides, but they all have upsides, so, like, I'm also a public school kid, so it's not like I've been in the private school and I'm like, well, I haven't had an opinion. Not that that's bad. It's just that I don't know. I never really formulated one because I was in the public school, so it wasn't really. It's not like I had a lot of time to think about all my other varieties of schooling that I may or may not be able to have. So I just kind of.
Yeah. On my side on this matter, I've always been a huge fan of public schools. I've always felt public schools, while they have a lot of flaws that need to be worked through, they are the best way to move forward. But I've definitely recognized that private schools have their advantages, and usually they can have a higher quality of teaching because of how higher funded they are. And they can also have more specialized teaching for people wishing to go in particular fields. This is very specific for art schools and religious schools in particular, where the public school system is actually particularly bad at working with these. So, yeah, my background for why we chose this topic, a little while back, were looking at what topics we wanted to do for the show. We have a bit of a list going on, and we ran into this one and felt it was one that we could have the longest discussion on at the time, so we felt it would be a good topic for today as well. There's not much more background behind that. Some other episodes we've done have had a bit more.
Yeah, we if you want to tune in for the rest of these episodes later on, we have this, I'm not going to say bad habit, but I'm also going to use the term bad habit. We have this bad habit of, like, picking a topic and then just rolling with it, which isn't necessarily the best thing to do, but we don't do a lot of research. We just kind of go with what we have already known about the topic and have kind of pre-discussed briefly prior to the episode in and of itself.
Yeah.
So when we picked this topic, we didn't, like, do a lot of research. We're not going to throw a bunch of stats at you in most situations. Like, this is just a very much conversational debate, and because of that, we just kind of go for it with what we have on hand. So.
And I'm still always the one bringing in the statistics and facts.
He knows so many random facts. I don't understand. And they're like, the random facts I know aren't going to be useful in almost any situation, but
You
Gaia...
have the animal facts.
I have the animal facts, but then Gaia's like, I know this random statistic that randomly applies to this random debate. And I'm like, how do you do even... Anyways.
We had some good ones on that when we were debating prisons.
Yeah, just throw that one out there. Tune in for episode 2.
Yeah.
If you want that in a couple weeks. So, who wants to get started?
I'd say we should. Since you're going in favor of having many schools, would you like to make an intro, or should I start with one?
I can go first if you'd like.
It seems to be the pattern we've developed.
Apparently I just go first. It's an interesting time. Okay, so, well, haven't had the most time to prepare this, but I think the freedom to choose anything is very important. To be able to choose what you want to do in life, where you want to go, what you want to study, pretty much everything. It's not only a key part of who you are, but a basic human freedom to be able to pick most things, right? And to deny someone that choice is going to harm them in the long run. And I mean, like, yes, we've accepted that, except for extenuating circumstances, such as moving around a lot, or if you have some form of disability, etc.
Yeah, physical or mental disabilities that prevent you from being able to go to public school.
You might be homeschooled, which, aside from that, there's other people who this may apply to, who may need extra help, who may need an extra choice in the matter. People who get bullied profusely, people who have speech impediments who need a better level of care that isn't provided in public schools, people who need a little bit of extra attention to really do well in school and just aren't getting it in public schools by the sheer mass of people attending them. And the continuation of this repetitiveness of taking away teachers and staff, etc., and just adding more students to classes. And yes, they've kind of put a limit on it, at least where I'm from, because I'm from BC. I know that we are supposed to only have like 30 kids per class. But even in 30 kids per class, that's a lot of kids. If I was in charge of a group of 13-year-olds, do you think I would be doing a great job of watching them all? Probably not. Like, there's so many flaws to that. And although I don't know the specific class sizes of private schools, you can imagine that because they're better funded, you would have a better chance of watching everyone and giving everyone the care and support they need, even if it's not always teachers, but with more support workers, etc., in the school themselves. You can, or even smaller class sizes, depending on the private school statistics. I don't know. But you'd have more support. And if you're homeschooled, you'd obviously have more support because it's like you and your siblings, maybe, if you have them, and your parents or some other family member, I guess. And they're teaching you, so like you're clearly getting support. It may not always be the support you need because, like I said, homeschooling has flaws, but there's support there, and hopefully if you need something, they can reach out and get it for you.
Yeah, it's a very friendly environment.
It is, in theory. There's always the odd cases where things aren't friendly, where you don't agree, whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes parents aren't nice, things happen. But for the most part, you'd imagine that being at home, if you're choosing to be homeschooled over going to public school, you'd imagine that it's a more friendly environment than public school. And that choice should be available if it's going to help you learn, if it's going to help you succeed to a higher degree later in life in whatever you choose to do. You should be able to take that choice for yourself and not have anyone decree, you can't do that. And furthermore, if we're choosing to take away this choice now, it's getting to a bit of a slippery slope. And I know I've said this in other episodes that you guys haven't heard yet, but Gaia definitely has. But it taking away this choice leads to a bit of a slippery slope, because how many choices are we allowed to take away before it's not a basic human right anymore? And I know that this is just the beginning, but you're taking away possible very important resources for children who may need it.
Right.
For teenagers who may need it, for adults who have gone into this profession and have gotten this job, or who want this job and who may need that extra little bit of support so that they don't have to watch 30 kids on their own, or need the pay boost of a private job because of other things that are happening in their lives. So you're taking this choice not only away from the parents and the kids, but from the teachers. And once again, gonna really pound this point home, it's a free choice. And if it's the best choice for you and for your kids, or whatever, for your career, you should be able to make it without the government saying, nah, you can't do that. You should be able to make a choice for yourself, about yourself.
Right. Okay. So
sorry, I rambled.
No, that wasn't too bad, actually. So for my particular opinions on private schooling, homeschooling, etc., I'm going to begin my argument by stating what I feel are the problems with private schools and homeschools, and then I'll say what I think is the good things with public school.
I was hoping we would avoid that. Continue.
So I'm going to start with homeschooling, because homeschooling is honestly my least favorite of the three that we're mentioning.
That's fair.
So to me, oh, sorry, I blocked my mouth while I said that.
You did, but that's okay. We're fine.
So to me, when I look at homeschooling, I see most often people who are not trained to be teachers, people who are not trained in the fields they are teaching, and instead people who think, no, not to give any insults in any way, but instead I've noticed homeschooling comes down to people who feel they can teach better than the education system, right? Which is not always the case, but still something I've definitely seen in the past. And the way it comes down is someone who thinks, well, they believe they can do better for their child, but without the proper training, without the education behind it, that might not end up being the case. Yeah?
Just side note about homeschooling real quick. homeschooling still has a curriculum
That is true.
that is
very
set
true.
out by each province or the government. Not entirely sure, but it still has a curriculum that still has to be taught and tests that still have to be mandated by someone outside of the family.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, there's the problem of parents or whoever is teaching you being like, I can teach you better than the rest of you teachers, you know, but it still has, and that's obviously not good. This falls under the category of there's problems with these situations.
Yeah.
But it still has a curriculum that needs to be taught, and that is a pretty strict curriculum. And you can add in other things, but you need to have these basics, so it's not like they're going to miss out on anything super big.
As well, another big thing I've noticed about homeschooling comes down to homeschooling is very boxed in. It's very closed off from the world. If you're being homeschooled, not only are you living at home, not only are you doing your relaxing at home, not only are you doing probably your schoolwork at home, since you might not have a school library to go to, you're doing your classes at home, you see your teachers at home, you're eating at home. What time are you not home? Unless you're going out for a trip to the mall, unless you're going out for a trip to go about, which you obviously can't do every day, especially if you have schoolwork assigned by, well, your parents in this situation, or a family member. What time are you not home? What time are you socializing with people outside of your family? What time are you getting experiences from other people's households, from other people's lives? What time are you getting to see the world around you besides just your time in your home? It's very little. It's a very minuscule amount. You're not socializing people. You're not making friend groups. And while it is true, people get bullied, and it's a very, very terrible thing about the public school system. That is a flaw of our public school system that we can fix, and it's a lot easier for us to address issues in the public school system.
Is it? You have been not you specifically, but like the government of Canada, administrations of each province, whatever, they've been trying to fix bullying and problems in the public school system for years. And yeah, it's gotten better, but it's not great. There's reasons that people drop out. There's reasons that people start homeschooling. And yeah, homeschooling comes with its own problems. Like socialization isn't always your cup of tea. And yeah, sometimes the only way out of your house is to head to the library for a bit. But you're guaranteed, well, not necessarily guaranteed, because again, this relies a bit on the parents here, but as a general rule, you're more guaranteed to not be terrorized by people in your own home.
I would argue against that, but that's not the statement for this debate. Definitely not.
Oh, yeah, no, that's a separate debate. I said it and was like, we'll get into that.
That's very case sensitive there.
Yeah, 100%. But as like a general statement, by strangers you don't know, or people that aren't related to you, you're generally less likely to get terrorized by people in your own home comparatively than to like public school, where if you do anything socially not quite right, they're not quite down with the times or whatever it is. That's a weird way to phrase that.
That's a very 70s way to phrase it.
Well, yeah, it is. We're here, but to not be as socially adept in any way, shape, or form can get you teased, can get you bullied, can get you physically bullied, mentally bullied, and there's been cases where people kill themselves over it. And that's
pretty extreme for this discussion, though.
Oh, 100% it is, and I'm so sorry to brought that one up. But like there's been those cases that can't be ignored. And that is less likely to happen in your own home. Gotta give it.
We can say that, but that just points to the fact that in public schools we need to better address the issues of bullying, and we need to
100%.
We need to better punish those who are doing the bullying, and we need to, for the kids who are being bullied chronically, whatever you want to say, we can still have those kids together and have them pulled away from the kids that are bullying them without running the risk of completely socially isolating them. And I would also say that homeschooling, even if you get bullied in school, if it doesn't reach that issue, I would still say being bullied in school will have a better outcome than having never gone to public school for long periods of time. Because if you're not because you can't be home forever. At some point, you need to work. You might want to go to university. You might want to go to a trade school or a college or whatever post-secondary. Maybe you just want to get a job in your field. Maybe you would love to be a writer or a songwriter. Those all are jobs that require interactions with a lot of people on a daily, weekly basis.
Oh, yeah.
These are all jobs where you need to have these skills. And if you're homeschooled your entire life, you have the skills to deal with a subset of 5 or 6 people max. You don't have the skills to deal with groups of people. You don't have the skills to deal with being in a crowd situation. You don't have the skills to deal with large-scale friendships, large-scale groups. And when that happens, sure, we saved you from bullying in school, and if you were being bullied to the point of considering doing some pretty bad things.
I really shouldn't have said that one on open air.
Actually, that's an important point to notice, because I would call that one of the extreme circumstances where homeschooling makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. That's probably an extreme circumstance.
we never categorized that as extreme before, but I think we should now.
Now that I've said it, now that we're out here, now that
I've
said that one out loud, that should probably be categorized differently.
That's definitely extreme. But besides those circumstances, even if you got bullied in school, you learn how to deal with this type of stuff. You learn how to deal with people. You learn how to make people feel happier, more comfortable in your presence. And that's a very important skill. Even if you didn't get the skills to work with large groups, to work in teams, to have a lot of friends, you still know how to deal with people in some way, people who believe they're better than you. And you now have the knowledge to handle that.
Admittedly, I don't have anything to debate that one. I know that I'm not supposed to admit defeat on that, but in this case,
you can state if there's a point that you can't rebuttal.
I don't think I can rebut some of that because homeschooling does have its perks, its upsides, like I've said. Yeah. But that social lesson that is like a key part of being a human, of being a person, that we always consider a key part of our humanity is talking to other people, is being able to talk to groups, being able to perform socially, etc. And to not be able to do that isn't helpful. And I personally, on a personal level, lever, nailed that. On a personal level, I would probably agree that having been bullied and stuff in middle school and in high school and whatever, I would agree that I would have rather gone through that than been homeschooled. So I don't think I can rebut that, and I will admit that homeschools probably have more issues than they have good points.
I do have one more thing about homeschools I need to wonder. This is one more that I also need to ask your opinion on, like even outside of the debate, because I'm not entirely sure how strong the point is, but it's something that's really bothered me. There's a very different situation between homeschooling and public schooling, in that in public school, your teacher will be someone who has gone through degrees for their program, who is passionate about the program and loves what they're doing most of the time. We've definitely all had those teachers that weren't, but most often you'll get a teacher who loves what they're doing. When at home, you'll more than likely, your teacher who teaches all your courses does not love the courses, but instead is doing it out of love for you. So I personally don't know which one of these is more important, and that's definitely a case-by-case thing, but I would say having a teacher who loves the material and then going home to a parent who loves you and is willing to help you with the material is the best situation, and it's a very rare situation, but I would personally say that is the best that it could be.
In debates, you probably shouldn't admit defeat as much as I'm going to, but I would agree. I personally believe you're right. Just generally, because to have a teacher who is more passionate about the kids they're teaching than their subject might not always be amazing, because they still need to teach the kids the subject. Yeah. So having it balanced out might be better.
And teachers can sometimes flesh out a little past the subject to make the earlier stuff make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, but to do that, you need to be passionate about your subject. So I think teachers should be passionate about their subject, and I think parents should love their kids. Yeah. Generally.
Even so, while these are all good debates for homeschooling, and we've kind of agreed homeschooling needs to be extreme, there's also private schools, and nothing I've said so far actually holds for private schools.
Yeah, I know. That's why I admitted defeat on the homeschools front, because I'm like, I don't have that many points to like really rebut anything you're saying, because homeschools do have the issues, and they do have high points as well, and it really depends on a case. I feel like for homeschooling specifically, it really depends on a case-per-case basis on what's the best.
Most definitely.
Because you're definitely weighing heavy consequences on both ends of that spectrum, and it's just which one is worse at that point, if you're considering homeschooling, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, homeschooling is usually like, I call it like a good last resort.
Yeah, so as a last resort, it's not necessarily a worst option. You should still be able to choose it as a last resort, but I feel like as a last resort, that then still falls under your extremes rule.
Yeah. Also, if your household is poor, your public school can provide resources to help you out to get the stuff you need for school, get food and stuff like that, which is a very good benefit. Now, not a lot of schools do this, and I really want to see Canada, like the provinces, open their doors more to more funding school lunches, more funding for like drinks and food on school grounds. Of course, healthy drinks. I don't mean alcoholic drinks there. Obviously.
I assumed you were talking about an elementary school, so
even
presumably.
middle schools and high schools, having the ability for kids to reach out and say, my household's not doing that well, I need the help to perform my best, and schools being able to provide that is a very, very good thing, and it definitely opens the doors to like financial aid that universities provide, and having an idea of how it works already by having the government have already worked with the government for these things.
Yeah, and I would agree. I would like that as well, to have it be a bit more active like that. So I think like we've kind of, I know I've admitted, I keep saying admitted defeat. Homeschooling is kind of a last resort in my personal viewpoint. But I still think private schools, although I, as a person who have been to public schools, I'm not really fond of them per se, but I still think...
I'm not either, let's be real.
Yeah. But I still think they have good points and have really good things about them that you have yet to reply to. So,
so private
hit
schools.
me with it.
Private schools is a lot harder one to debate because I can no longer debate the grounds that the education's not as good. Because private school education is commonly considered better than public school.
Because people are paid more.
Until you get to university. In universities, public universities are considered better than private in most grounds. For the sole reason that public universities are very extremely mandated in what they teach. Like, they have to teach certain things when private universities aren't. That's I looked into that a while back.
How do you define private and public universities?
Public universities are ones that receive government funding.
Okay.
Because there are some universities don't, and those are usually the ones with the extremely high tuition. And then, so you have the university we're in, UNB, is a public university, meaning the government has very strongly said, here are the things we need you to be teaching in your programs. Here are the important things. And the university has to provide on that, which private universities are not as mandated by that, because in that case, you're choosing to go to an entity to teach you certain things, and you're out of the government's hands. When in, schooling before you're 18, the government sees it as its duty to make sure you've learned everything. So that's why, would private schools before you're 18 are often considered better because they follow the mandates, but also just have more funding to do stuff. And they're usually also boarding schools, which have their advantages. Even so, with private schools, sorry, I'm formulating my thoughts.
It's okay.
One possible big issue with private schools is, let's remember, private schools are very commonly, I don't want to call them rich kid schools, but they're for those who can afford them.
Which kind of makes them rich kid schools.
And they definitely segregate a group of people off from the rest of the public and put them in the group of, we are the wealthier students who can afford to go here. And
as a public school kid, I think we always kind of hated the private school kids. We didn't have that many private schools in my city, but I have never even seen a private school. Oh, I think we had two.
I think Newfoundland has two.
No, just in my city. I wasn't sure. I know we have one. I'm not sure about the other one, but there was at least one private school, and I think we all just kind of hated them. Not necessarily because they did anything wrong, but because they just were always so put together and knew their stuff. And when we had to go in to do anything, we always it wasn't a clear-cut dichotomy of we were the ramshackled rags and tags bunch of kids dressed in rags as jerseys or something, and they were clean, put together blazers, but because of course it's not going to be like that.
No.
But it was just kind of the difference was still there. It was still kind of apparent, and we weren't fond of that. But that happens with anything. Even within my own school, in public school, there was still that divide between certain people. So that's not the end of the world to me. So long as people are getting the education they desire is the main point.
But there is another big issue with private schools. Now, I know university is a place to specialize, to hone in on one specific skill and do good at it. But I personally feel before university, that all of a sudden, that specialization can be a very, very bad thing.
Oh, yes.
And private schools, the big thing about them is you can specialize. You can go to an arts private school and study mostly arts. But there's a huge issue with that because let's say I went to a private school that taught mainly arts and kind of went weak on the sciences. If they don't provide enough sciences, obviously I can't join into any public universities in Canada, which locks me down to private universities that favor that type of style. Or they just barely teach me enough, but I'm missing out on experiences with so many other skills and so many other fields and so many other things that are super important to know.
That could also be argued in the favor of my side as well, because public schools do the same thing. And the only reason that it's not as apparent is because public schools support either the sciences or sports, and those are the things that people look for the most, which is obviously why they're supported the most in public schools. But often the reason why kids go to private schools or specifically art schools is because public schools don't provide enough art courses. They don't provide enough funding for theater, for art, for music, for anything beyond like basic science and like sports stuff.
Well,
in a lot of cases, my classes, we couldn't even get a literature class.
really?
Yeah. And I mean, like our school wasn't bad. Like I liked my school for the most part. Like I wasn't going to go around repping the merch all the time, but like
Yeah.
I didn't mind the classes. I liked some of the teachers. It was a really nice time for the most part. But like there were cutbacks. We couldn't have the correct amount of arts classes. We didn't have the literature class that people wanted, but the science and maths and sports, anything, always ran. Because of course they did. Because it's a public school.
I'm going to argue against that, actually. You can finish your statement first, but yeah.
But then because of all of this, we had to have a specific art school in our district because we didn't have enough art
Was it a
schools
public
in our-
school or private?
I don't.
It was probably public. Most districts end up making one public school for arts.
I'm not sure. I think it might have been public, but that being said, I never went to it because I'm not an arts kid.
Yeah, I'm going to say it was
So-
probably public if it was in your district. Private schools, from what I know, usually don't declare themselves within a school district.
Oh yeah, probably 100%. But the thing is, they had to create one because most public schools don't have that art thing, and to have that entire art school be like out of your bus range, out of your immediate living area, makes it a little bit more difficult to get to, and to have just one because the majority of public schools don't focus on the arts is exactly the dichotomy. Wrong word choice. But that's exactly the thing that you're trying to say is wrong with private schools, but in reverse.
Well, I know I've definitely heard a lot of people quoting this with public schools, but coming from Newfoundland, which is where I've obviously the only school system I've been in for more than a year. I was in the Ontario school system for 1 year back in kindergarten, so it doesn't really count.
It's kindergarten.
Yeah, but in Newfoundland, in my school in particular, which was one of the better schools in the public system for Newfoundland, but most schools were still had like this, the only required credits in the sciences and maths to graduate in Newfoundland schools is 2 science courses, which can both be grade 11 if you want, and 3 math courses, which is grade 10, grade 11, grade 12. You also need 2 English courses. You need at least 1 language courses, which usually broke down to a literature class. You needed at least 1 sports-based course. You needed 2 social studies courses. And that was about it. And then everything else was breath courses. I know I took music band, like full-on band, for 3 years, right? Straight up 3 years I was in the full-on band. We went to performances and everything. We had arts courses that there was one big arts course, but I think there was another one you were allowed to take sometimes. We had construction-based courses, 2 of them. We had 1 course, not for welding, but more electrical style stuff, like engines and power.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off if you were
No, that's okay, that's okay.
We had an entire trades wing to our school, so if you wanted to do trades, you could.
Yeah, trades are very big, I found. We cut a bunch of trade courses in my school because they were too big.
We still had a lot of trades, and we had a lot of credits for sciences and maths, because we had to do math 10, 11, 12. You had to do at least, I think it's 2 science 11s. Because you had to do...
every school district in Canada requires at least the grade 11 sciences.
Yeah, 2 grade 11 sciences, and we needed 1 grade 12 science.
That was not required in Newfoundland. They encouraged it, but not forced it.
I think it was required for us. I can't remember what I ate for breakfast yesterday, so like I don't know how well I would remember my grad requirements.
I'm not sure actually.
But
I wouldn't know.
I think it was a grade 12 science, and then you had to have your at least PE 10, a bunch of at least 1 arts course, and you had to have English 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
And then there was probably, and I think you had to have a grade 11 language, but I'm not
Grade 11
sure.
language usually is, for us, the only options were French or literature.
I took Japanese as my grade 11 language.
Oh, that's lucky.
We-
That sounds like something BC would do.
We have more options. Admittedly, my school district,
You
my
are on the
school
Pacific
specifically,
Ocean. You guys do have a lot of more languages there.
yeah, we do.
I'm
I think
from
our
Newfoundland.
second, I think our second most spoken language, at least in my city, isn't actually French, because it's English, but I think it might be Mandarin as our second one.
Where in BC is your city? Like general location?
I'm 4 hours from Vancouver. Maybe it's BC
Are you
as
still
a
on the
whole.
coast?
No.
Oh,
Maybe it's BC as a whole that like the second most
yeah,
spoken
most of
language is
BC
Mandarin.
actually does have a lot of Mandarin speakers.
Yeah.
Japanese and Korean are both also very common.
I'm not entirely sure. It's not like I look at these statistics on the daily.
No, but I've definitely run into them in the past.
Yeah, exactly. So like, it's more useful for us to have a wider variety of languages than say here. Not necessarily because you guys don't have a lot of languages here, but just because you're predominantly you're English and French.
Yeah,
But,
we
like, we
barely
have a lot of
French in
English
Newfoundland. Though, my school, just to give reference for why my personal experiences aren't the best for referencing.
Oh yeah, sorry, we got on a weird tangent. Continue.
My school was considered one of the top French teachers and one of the top music teachers in the whole province teaching. Both of them retired while I was there. But we did have the top teachers, and their legacy is still being followed very strongly with our current teacher. Our current music teacher actually has toured across Canada before. His name's Adam Baxter.
Wow.
He's very good musician. Look up his music. It's actually really good. No, genuinely, I've listened to his albums. I have a signed copy of his album. It's really good. Yeah, Adam Baxter music. Anyway, I shouldn't be promoting him too much.
Are we allowed to promote people on here?
As a personal recommendation, I can recommend him.
Okay.
This is not the voice of the station. This is my personal opinions. I love his music. His music's really good.
Duly noted.
But
Moving on.
for private schools, there's definitely room for public schools to be more open. But as you definitely notice, besides some public schools ignoring arts and some public schools including arts, that's more dependent. Newfoundland's kind of big on including arts. We've been very big, and BC's getting good at it. BC has definitely been developing to include it.
We're working on it. BC is the liberal.
BC doesn't have a conservative party. Case in point. You do technically, only technically,
but it's not. It's not.
They
really,
haven't won a seat in 3 elections.
It's a mess. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. For specialization,
can I briefly comment? In your case, it sounds like they're a bit more lax on maths and sciences. In my case, it sounds like they're a bit more lax on arts. So in any case, your side of this debate is still missing certain aspects of their teaching requirements, whereas mine, yeah, I mean, I'm still for public schools, but for the choice of improving a specific part of your knowledge, if you really enjoy it, you could go into a private school and not only have more access to all of your classes, hopefully. Well, it depends on what private school you go to, but depending on which one it is, you could have more access to all of your classes and specify in something that you really like.
Well,
whereas, sorry, I'm going to keep cutting you off for one more sentence. Whereas in public schools specifically, you get a little bit more issues of something is always missing.
I would not state that for my school. My school, it sounds like math and science were lax. It was more that math and science weren't heavily required. I actually basically went through, besides that set of music, I basically did only math and science. Well, in my school. My school was pretty unique at having everything, and most schools don't. So that's why I'm saying my experiences aren't the best. But this just shows a more fundamental problem with public schools that can be fixed and addressed, is that public schools need to push the opportunity to experience what you want at all times, and not enforce, but encourage a more wide breadth of skills in multiple different fields instead of having specializations. Because as a kid, that is the most important thing, that you have experience in many different fields. You have experience with many different things, so that when it comes down to make your choice, you can make a very informed decision. And my issue with private schools is you go to a private school before you know what you want to do. I would definitely say, until I was 17, I was still flinging around between the ideas of being a physicist and being a politician, and I'm still flinging around between those two ideas.
To be fair, people pay way more than private school tuition to go to university. and
Yes.
still don't know what they want to do.
Yeah, and that's
So
that's
that's-
another huge problem. We
but-
need to be
and-
better at addressing these things.
And private schools may give people a better idea of what they want to do. We don't know per se because neither of us have been in a private school.
Yeah, but-
and neither of us have like been asking around the private school districts. I don't know what districts those are, but like if you have a private school, those ones, I guess, being like, hey, do you know what you want to do with the rest of your life? Because like we, why would we be doing that? So like we don't really know.
We don't know, but
What
if
happens?
you don't have a wide generalization of ideas for all the courses, for ideas of what each field does, you will never be able to make an informed decision.
And how
on
does
what you're
public
doing.
school do that? How
Well,
do they
public
provide
school-
a wide, what's the word I'm looking for? I had it and then I
Range.
lost it. Oh, thank you. Range. A wide range of subject matters and explanations, because the things they teach you in high school aren't always applicable. They're going to teach you the basics of a bunch of fields and then be like, now you have to pick a job that you might want to go to, and you have to start taking courses to do that job when you're done. Good luck. And you have to do that, but you still don't know what those jobs are. They're just like, here's some basics, hope for the
You
best.
don't know what the jobs are, but you can better expect something from each job than to want to go into one field and not have any clue of what it's about. You mentioned your school had an entire wing for trades courses. If you wanted to experience trades and get an idea of what it's like, you could. If
We
you wanted
also
to
had an entire wing of tech.
Yeah.
technically.
So if you wanted to learn tech, there was a much better way for you
Yeah.
to understand and get an experience with it. If you want to learn math and science, if you want to learn phys ed, if you want to go to any of those types of fields, you got the basic experiences that you need to make that choice. The only thing your school was lacking was the arts. And my school was particularly lacking in the tech field. I will state that. My school definitely did not have the funding it needed. Most of the
Yeah.
province doesn't have the funding it needs, though. That's not my
yeah.
school's issue.
Yeah, there's some faults, but that's another problem with public schools. It's funding.
Yeah.
We can't fund public schools as much as we really, really want them to,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be so much better if they did. They can't fund everything,
Well,
which isn't always a bad thing because they kind of prioritize and they try and like give funding to one thing that one year and then the next thing a different year so that hopefully
Mm-hmm.
it can balance out enough that everything's okay. Which generally, as a generalization, it works.
yeah.
But there's still downfalls of it, and it's not
There
necessarily
is.
bad, but I'm just saying for this point,
Mm-hmm.
private schools don't have that problem, which gives them a good leg up on certain situations, which makes them just as good of a choice.
I still haven't
as
said much
public
about private
schools.
schools. We've gone
No,
off so
we
many
got into
tangents.
this has just been
but-
us bashing and disagreeing on
Yeah.
public schools
so
for a hot minute.
to give my real strong opinion on private schools, public schools have the room to be general. And while they definitely need more funding and governments are not focusing on it as much, which is definitely a downside to public schools do have the ability to receive funding relatively easily and don't depend on having multiple families throwing money at them for them to fund their own endeavors. They have government funding. They often do
To-
try to generalize.
To briefly argue the point about families throwing money at them, what do you think bake sales are? What do you think fundraisers are?
Those are
The-
for events, not for courses.
Not necessarily.
Almost always.
We did specific courses that had things to go along with them. We would have field trips, etc. That would be like an integral part of this course that would be worth a percentage of our grade that we couldn't do unless we did a lot of fundraisers. Any grad thing ever we had to fundraise for. That
Yeah.
is that the school has had funding for. We had to fundraise because they've used that funding for something else.
Yeah.
So we have to
that's
do
a huge
that.
problem with schools that need to be addressed. But
And that's parents buy those
ignoring
things.
trips and ignoring all these other things schools are adding in, just going down to straight course material. Private schools are specialized. That's their purpose. They exist to be a specialized
Not
school.
always.
Most of the time.
Sometimes they just exist to be a better education system.
I have literally never seen a private school like that. But I'm not going to say that
The-
you're wrong because that's just
I-
what I've seen.
No, that's fair. To be fair, the one in my city that I know about, I don't know the most about it because I didn't go to it, but it wasn't necessarily specialized. It was just that it had a better level of courses. It had better teachers. It had better funds. It had better resources available to them. I know someone who went there who went because he had a speech impediment, and they had they had this speech therapist, come in and talk to him all the time. It was built into his schedule, and they just had the resources for that. And that was just part of it. And it wasn't a specialized part of it. It was just something they could do because they had the resources.
Which is definitely a big problem with public schools.
Yeah. So it was just a higher level of resources, higher level of training, and nothing about it that I know of, could be wrong, is specialized. It's just a better level.
Well, that is true. And speech therapy, stuff like that, is actually really common for private schools, which is one of the biggest advantages of private schools. And I feel public schools need to start adding these things in more, which Newfoundland has started doing and BC is trying to do now. I should mention that. They are working towards that.
Ooh, go BC.
It's important to mention that majority of, I think 90% of private schools in Canada are Catholic private schools. They are, and not just that, the next 5% are specialized art schools. The last 5% are more general. So 95%.
To be fair, the one in my city is a Catholic school.
Yeah. So this presents the huge issue that these are specialized, and just as well, the government does not as strongly mandate what is being taught in these schools. Well, they still do mandate. It's not as important. So these schools can be free to teach more of what they feel and less of what is actually needed to be taught. And
which admittedly isn't good.
Which is definitely not good. And there's definitely the fact that because these schools are specialized, there's always a possibility a parent might look at their kid and say, I want you to grow up to be in this field, and send them off to a privatized school that focuses on that field. But that kid might not want to do that, and now they don't have the experiences in other fields to make an educated decision on what they should do, and will risk not doing what they're, well, quote unquote, born to do.
Which is definitely not good. If that ever happens, yes, it's not good.
Which is quite common in wealthier families.
Yeah, which definitely sucks. But the thing is, my side isn't private schools are better than public schools. My side is you should be able to choose what type of school you go to. And that should include a say with the child as well.
If the child had a say of going to a private school, I would definitely be a lot more in favor of it.
Okay, what if, on my side, if to choose, you not only had to have, like, the say of the parents, because the parents have to pay the fees for the private school, but the say of the child as well.
But what happens if the child believes he'll grow up to be a amazing, super popular music artist, and his parents want to support that and send him to a music school, when that is very, very unrealistic? It can happen, but very unrealistic. And now the kid doesn't have experience in other courses to go on to schools that could teach him better in stuff like maths or English.
Well,
what happens then?
Well, hopefully the private schools would have enough resources that at least in the beginning of his life, like, to be specialized as a musician, you might not go to a music school for, like, grades 1 to 6.
Yeah, like, it's usually grade 7 where private schools start.
Exactly. Like, even if it is a private school in elementary school, they're obviously going to give you, like, a wide
but universities
amount of
do require your grade 10 to 12 courses to join.
Yeah.
Which we would then need to ensure that private schools are teaching the grade 10 to 12 courses required for university entry, and then all of a sudden we run into the same issue that there's no room to teach them the specialized courses anymore, which makes this just an expensive general school.
But the thing is, it depends on what kind of private school you're going to, because yes, there's the specialized schools, which will have to make time for the courses that are required of you. Like, if we have a trade school, that's our wing, it's a trade school in my high school, and they had to make time for the courses they needed to graduate, but they still did all the trade stuff.
Yeah.
And that worked. And many private schools could do the same thing. However, not all private schools are the same, because some of them are just generalized schools with better resources, and some of them are specialized schools, and those are two different types of private schools that are both good options and both should be a choice for people who want them and have discussed with it and, like, want to be there instead of being in public school. Yeah. It's not necessarily the best choice, but it should be a choice.
It still does fall under the problem that kids who go to private schools might develop a more superiority complex towards those who didn't go to private schools, because they just feel like they are receiving such a better education that they're not equal to other students.
And that
which is a more minor problem, but I would still say as a kid that could snowball into something really bad.
Oh yeah, 100% it could. And I would say that doesn't just fall down into the private school sector, but also into home life as well.
It does.
Because if you're the kind of person that teaches your kids that they're better than everyone else,
Yeah.
That's obviously going to snowball.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're the kind of person that your kid comes home and is like, I went to school and I'm smarter than everyone else because, you know, I went to this private school, and you're the kind of person that's like, that's not true, treat everyone equally. That can change and shape people differently. So I'm not saying that private schools don't have that effect, because yes, they do in some cases and in a lot of cases, but it's not the only factor there.
Yeah. This also comes down to my personal opinions, because I've always held the belief that if parents are not teaching kids the material they need to know, it's the school's job to do so. And I know a lot of people who very strongly disagree to that. We might actually do that debate in the future, because I have a lot of strong opinions on that matter.
Yeah.
And we might both too strongly agree on the same thing, though, for that. Yeah. We have about 9 minutes remaining.
Amazing.
So we'll probably just clue up everything now.
So,
but yeah, looking at that, if private schools basically need to become pretty generalized schools overall, the best result to me would be fund your public schools more, put more energy into public schools, do better courses, and offer something within the public school system for parents willing to pay for a better education.
But that takes more money from people who don't have it, which is why private schools were there in the first place. Because public schools were for people who couldn't pay the private school fees. And obviously that may not be the way it, like, immediately created.
That's pretty much how it started, yeah.
But, like, because to just have that within the same school, could you imagine the kind of chaos that would happen if the rich kids were in the same building, had uniforms, had everything else, but were just, like, in different classrooms? That would be such a horrible move. To have them in a completely separate location, it makes more sense.
It makes more sense, but
it's not good, but it's still a good option for the people who want it or need it, and that is my point, and that is why it should still be a choice.
Personally, I think it's still splitting our population at a young age and breeding a feeling of superiority in members of our generation, breeding a feeling of being better, and breeding the divides that exist in our society now at the level that children have. And I think that will cause too much damage in the long term.
That still happens in public schools.
But in public schools, we can better prevent it since everyone's together. And so the kids who think they're better are in courses with kids who think they're worse. Now, public schools have their issues. I definitely don't like how public schools teach, but we definitely can fix public schools easier because they're mandated by our votes. We can vote in someone who wants to change public schools instead of having a private school that will not change, because what's going to happen? You're just going to stop paying and some other rich kid will come in.
There's definitely issues, and I don't think this is a debate that we can finish in the time
No,
we have.
only
I think I'm gonna close this one up now. So we've agreed that homeschooling has probably more issues than it does solidly good points, but it is still an okay last resort option.
Yeah.
We haven't really decided where public and private schools lie. For my side of the debate, I still think that it is they're both should be good choices, but like I'm really emphasizing that they should be a choice, and but we both agree that public schools should be better and could be better, and that is where we're probably going to leave it. So I'm Kayla.
And I'm Gaia.
And this has been the
Public Debate, episode 0.
Oh, yeah.
From here, we're going to be moving into our ending song for today. The song is Louder Than Words by the band Les Frictions, one of my personal favorite bands. So thank you for listening. Have a great day.
Catch you next time.
See you later.
There are survivors, they're coming home. They float in darkness, they're not alone. Now here they come, now here they come. Now they will be received. could outrun the crash. It was all reduced to rubble, and then again to ash. To the blinding burning light